words may be, for my unconquerable soul, I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Today, President Mandela takes office in Pretoria, balancing black aspirations with white fears.
Remember this day, boys. This is a day our country went to the dogs.
Brothers, sisters, this is the time to build our nation. All of the whites are cheering for South Africa. All of the blacks are cheering for England. How long before the World Cup?
Don't get your hopes up. We're a damn disgrace.
I've been invited to tea.
With who?
The president.
Tell me, Francois, how do we inspire ourselves to greatness when nothing less will do? How do we inspire everyone around us?
What did he want?
I think he wants us to win the World Cup.
This rugby is a political calculation.
It is a human calculation.
According to the experts, we'll reach the quarterfinals and no further.
According to the experts, you and I should still be in jail.
Times change. We need to change as well. We'll become more than just a rugby team. Did you ever imagine this? How could I?
Do you hear? Listen to your country. This is it. This is our destiny.
I was thinking about how you spent 30 years in a tiny cell and come out ready to forgive the people who put you there.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Hall of Fame sportscaster for CBS, Leslie Visser, and her guest, captain of the Rugby World Cup winning Springbok team and the inspiration for the film Invictus, Francois Pienaar.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back after such a great day and afternoon of so much commentary and opinion. It is a privilege to be here, and especially with this man whose story we never get tired of. If there is one person, one story who knows the power of sports to change the world, as Nelson Mandela taught all of us, it is this man. Francois, welcome. First of all, what do you know of Mr. Mandela's condition?
Hello, Leslie. I speak to my friends back home. Madiba we call Nelson Mandela Madiba, which means father. He's very ill. You know, he's 94. He's frail. But we love him so much that the world, every time Madiba has a checkup or he goes to hospital, it's on CNN, it's on all the major stations across the globe, because he's such an inspirational leader. But we must not forget he's 94 years old. We want him to become 194, maybe 994. So he's not well, but he's not in bad shape. That's what I hear from back home.
Okay, well that's excellent to hear. We can all not hear it enough of the moment when Nelson Mandela gave you the cup. Will you share it with us?
I often say that it's impossible to describe it in words that's going to do it justice, because it was such an emotional journey. You know, I didn't appreciate the power of sport before we went into the World Cup in South Africa in 1995. I mean, maybe a lot of people know the story, but for those that don't, you know, we were not the favorites going into the first ever World Cup in South Africa. Our country has just crowned its first white-black president. We've got a terrible past when you look at apartheid, and rugby is followed by the majority of white people in South Africa. So when the Rugby World Cup came to South Africa, it was a sporting event, and for me as an individual, you know, when you're a sportsman, you're quite myopic in your focus. All you want to do is you want to measure yourself against the best in the world, play as hard as you can, and the ultimate is to win. You know, you saw some wonderful athletes here in the Olympic Games. It's all about winning. That's how you measure yourself. So when the World Cup came to South Africa, the country was divided, especially the black people didn't support, I would say, much stronger feelings towards the rugby team because it was a symbol of apartheid. But because of this great leader and this great man who said to all of South Africans, you know, these are our boys, but he did it in a special way. I mean, there's so many stories, Leslie, I can share with you before I get to the moment when he handed me the cup, just to contextualize it. You know, we were playing against Australia in the opening match, and they were undefeated, and we were finishing our last training session, and we heard that Madiba was coming to visit us. And when the helicopters landed, I went and greeted him, and I walked him over to the team, and the team lined up to meet him. Now, a lot of the players would never have met him before, and he would not have met them. So when I walked up to the first player, whose name was, I recall, Quibus, and I was going to say, Madiba, this is, he said, Quibus. And he shook his hand, and then he walked on through the team, and he shook the hand of each and every player by name. He knew all their names, you know, and that was just, I was absolutely gobsmacked by it, that he took the time to learn their names. And, you know, in life, one of the small lessons I teach my children is you always look somebody in the eye and you say hi and remember their name because, you know, it's a sign of respect. And this journey continued, but the ultimate was the picture you see on the screens behind us, when I had the privilege to share the stage with him. And what is he wearing? You know, he's wearing a symbol that a lot of the black people in South Africa saw as a symbol of apartheid. He wore a springbok on his heart, and he said to everyone in South Africa, support these guys, they are boys. And I was, when he gave me the cup, I wanted to hug him, you know, I wanted to just, because you just won, it's the most unbelievable feeling. And he said some nice things to me, and I said some nice things to him, and the tears swelled up in my eyes, because one thing I'll never forget is the beautiful smile. I mean, he was so proud as a leader of a very young democracy, you know, that we won the World Cup.
As you've shared with us, his contributions are so unequaled, but conversely, you learned the African national anthem, Nkosi Sikelel. Did I get that right?
Very good pronunciation. Yeah, I come from an Afrikaans community. I grew up speaking Afrikaans only, and our national anthem has got 5 languages. It's Afrikaans, English, Xhosa, Sotho, and Zulu. You know, to learn that was difficult. I can't speak English properly. I've only learned that later on in my life. But it was very important to sing our national anthem. And I don't want to over-dramatize this.
I don't think that's possible, do you?
But, you know, at the final, I was the first guy to knew how to sing it, and I sang it with pride because I realized the importance of being able to sing it with pride. But at the final, I couldn't sing. And the reason I couldn't sing is because I knew if I would try to sing, I would cry. You know, and if you're a rugby player, you need to be tough. You can't, you know, it's not cool to cry in front of people. The whole world is watching. And the reason I was so emotional is just before we left the changing room to go onto the field. And if you imagine, you know, your biggest deal you've done in your life, the biggest sporting event, and there's some wonderful athletes here, you know the feeling, how tense you are and how prepared you are and how focused you are. So we were in the changing room getting ready for the game, the biggest game in our lives, when there was a knock on the door. And the door opened and in walked Mr. Mandela. And he wore our jumper. You know, he wore a Springbok jersey. And when he turned around, my number was on his back. So when I ran out and I stood there, I mean, I was so emotional. I was so ready to play. You know, every fiber in one's body is just ready to go. And I couldn't sing because I knew if I would sing, I would get very emotional.
I think that's such a great story. I think the world did regard that as the moment South Africa went from apartheid to democracy. Is that overstating it?
You know, it's almost understating it in a way, because what happened in South Africa in the 24 hours since the final whistle blew, it's impossible to, again, explain or to capture. For the first time in our country's history, everybody was a world champion. Everybody, for the first time in our history, smiled. And the streets were just filled with people. People rolled out in the streets, cars were, and it was just, the nation came to a standstill and it became a big party. where different races, different religion, people that were opposed, that were angry at each other, were world champions. And that gave us a platform. You know, there were deep wounds in South Africa, understandable wounds, and healing started. So it gave us a kickstart, you know, to build on a young democracy, to start readdressing what happened in the past, and to become a beacon of light and an example to the rest of the world that, you know, people can forget their past and build a future together.
What can athletes learn from that about their own lives, about being the master of their fate, the captain of their soul?
Well, I think Carl Lewis described it the other morning. He said you've got to be the CEO in your life. But, you know, I think you've got to differentiate between a team sport and individual sports. In a team environment, it's a little bit more complex. I think it's tougher in an individual environment because it's you against the rest of the world. But in a team environment, you have help. And rugby is played by all shapes and sizes, and it's quite a complex game. So to answer your question, I think, you know, if you manage to play sport, you're very blessed, because sport teaches you a lot of things. And we heard about education, we heard about health, a lot of good things. It teaches you to understand people also better. And in our team, we had different religions, and we were all one, which is amazing. But I think when you get the opportunity to do something special, and we did something special as a team, there comes a responsibility with that. And as teams and as individuals, take that responsibility and influence communities and societies for the betterment of the communities and societies, and role models. You know, that's what kids want. They want role models. They aspire to people. So when the Olympic Games takes place, and Carl Lewis and a great friend of ours, Ilana Meyer, she's sitting in the audience. I mean, she did unbelievably well in the Olympic Games, and all the girls in South Africa wanted to be Ilana Meyer, and they started running and training. So that's the power of sport, you know. And if you do it at the highest level, you have a responsibility, and that responsibility is to pay forward, is to give back. This whole forum is about, you know, what can sport do? And I've listened to some wonderful debates and wonderful ideas. But the next step is, do we actually implement that? And if I can come back to one of the greatest leaders the world has ever seen, to Madiba. Yes, he made fantastic speeches, you know, and the speeches are there for everybody to go and see. But the difference to a lot of speeches and speeches that I've heard, he implemented, he activated. You know, it's what is going to be the next step.
He filled the chair.
He filled the chair. I mean, former President Sarkozy this morning used a wonderful example of the empty chair, sport being the empty chair around the boardroom and in corporate society and so forth. Madiba sat in that chair. You know, he filled the chair himself. And that's going to be, you know, the uniqueness of Doha GOALS is wonderful ideas. What are we going to do with those ideas? And how will we measure those ideas in years to come, especially when the biggest sporting circus in the world comes here in not too a distant future as time flies.
For societies or countries that are struggling with the distance South Africa came, can you explain, you said you were a blonde son of apartheid, and really what that meant? I think you were sharing with me that the division was absolute between black and white.
Yeah, I used to be a blonde son. What I've got left is not a lot.
It looks good.
Yeah, when I grew up, to explain to the audience, in South Africa, I grew up in an Afrikaans community. I went to an Afrikaans school. I spoke Afrikaans. And what I listened to was the politics of the day. And that's the politics of your mother and your father and their friends and the small community that you live in. So you don't own your brain, really. You know, they own your brain. I wish I owned my own brain as a young kid, because you never ask questions about why do black people not go to the same school as I do? You know, why can't they drive on the same bus and so forth? And that's how you grow up. So you don't own your brain. It's when I went to university then, you know, you think you're smart and you start getting involved in all these debates. When we had intense discussions about Madiba and about politics. And when the trailers started playing, there was the scene in the beginning where the rugby coach says to the players, remember this day, boys, this is the day your country is going to the dogs. And that's how a lot of white South Africans felt. They were scared. They were worried. They were nervous. And when I grew up as a young kid, Mandela was a bad guy. He was a terrorist. That's what I heard. You know, he's a bad guy. This guy, if he comes out of jail, you know, he's going to do the most awful things. So the message growing up and what I've learned is I wish I owned my brain when I was younger. And that's why I'm delighted that we've got 400 bright youngsters here who own their brain already, is to empower the youth, is to listen to the youth and give the youth an opportunity to prove to us what they can do, to showcase what they can do.
You said you mentioned Mr. Mandela in jail, and didn't you go during the tournament to his prison cell?
Yeah, I did, and that's when I did cry. It's when, after we beat Australia, you know, they were the favorites. We beat them. It was an amazing feeling in the country because all of a sudden, South Africans started saying, whoa, maybe this team can go all the way. Of course, we believed we could. We then went and visited Robben Island. I've never been to Robben Island. And I was the last player to walk into the cell. And what struck me was how small the cell was. You know, I stuck out my hands and I could touch the walls. And when I grabbed the bars and looked through the bars, all I could see was nothing. It was incredibly emotional because it then dawned on me the enormity of this leader, Mr. Nelson Mandela, is that he sat in that cell for 17 years. He was in jail for 27 years, but he was in that cell for 17 years. And he came out with forgiveness in his heart.
It was very moving. The movie we all know so well. Before I let you go, I'm friends with Matt Damon, and he told me he worked out like a crazy man to just try to approximate you. So did he do a good job?
Well, he got the accent right, which I asked him. There's two things I asked him, is to get the accent right, because whenever Hollywood plays a South African, we come across so dumb. It's scary, you know. It's slow, it's great, it's fantastic. We really come across as not the brightest species on planet Earth. So one thing I thought he got right was the accent. The other thing is vanity. Because there's a photograph, and I'm so happy it's not on the screen, but when I was given the cup from Mr. Mandela and I raised the cup above my head, when I looked at that photograph, my pants are really high up. And the reason why pants are so high up is when, you know, I was taught whenever you meet important people, you need to be neatly dressed and you stick in your shirt. My shirt was sticking out, so I stuck it in and I tightened it. But I tightened it so high that when I lift the cup, my pants were almost sitting under my... So I said to him, can you just drop the pants in the movie, please? And he did that. He was true to his word. But the movie is, there's some parts of it that I really like. There's other parts that I really don't like.
An athlete doesn't like the sports scenes.
It's weird, you know.
So
the sports scenes are difficult. But when you sit and watch your life and a part of it on the screen, it's bizarre. It's weird. But it's very blessed, you know. And I'm not saying it glibly. I was very lucky. You know, I was so lucky to be able to share the platform and experience firsthand the power of sport.
Well, and we see that power going forward. Isn't Rugby Sevens going to be in Rio?
Yeah, very excited about that. So in Rio, for the first time, Rugby Sevens will be played. And it's now, Rugby 15 is played in 120 countries in the world. So it's a growing sport. And I think Sevens, because it's not as complex, doesn't have all the rules and stoppages, I think you'll see it starting to grow in powerhouses like in America. You know, if in America and South America, especially if teams start playing the game more, they've got wonderful athletes that are angry and they're skillful and they're quick. You can now win a gold medal by playing rugby. I think it's wonderful.
Just finally, you have a foundation. What is it that youth, the games in London were aimed at youth? What would you like to see for generations to come with sports?
It was mentioned the whole time this morning, education. You know, for us, I started something 10 years ago, and you know, that's part of the responsibility. It's called the Make a Difference Foundation. I like acronyms. It's MAD. It's the MAD charity. And
typical rugby guy.
Got to be. I mean, it's from a rugby player. And what we do is we find bright kids that don't have finances, and we put them in the best schools. And we've got wonderful stories. You know, one of our best stories is a child from the townships is studying engineering at Harvard. And but for me, the nicest thing is that he played Othello at Harvard too. So that's a passion, and that's part of the responsibility. And especially for South Africa and Africa, education, 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 education. You know, if we don't invest in education in South Africa, the next generation of leaders will not have the tools that they should have to keep this story in South Africa that everybody thought is not going to keep on going, that's going to be disrupted, that it's too good to be true, is to keep that story going and growing and, you know, and remain one of the shining examples in Africa.
But even for your own story, I think many people probably thought, well, he's the captain of the all-white team. He must have come from money, but sport provided you opportunity.
Oh yeah, no, we grew up without money, so you know, you either grow up on the other side of the railway line or this side of the railway line. I think I grew up on the railway line. I just managed to dodge the trains. But sport gave me an education. In South Africa, sport is popular, and because I played cricket, which is a game the Americans don't understand. You play for 5 days and there's no result. You know, what is this? This is a game.
It's coming to America, though. I know they are. David Hill.
I think it'll be unsuccessful, don't trust me.
Oh, okay.
So I played cricket and rugby, and because of that, I got a scholarship to go to university, and I studied law. So rugby and cricket gave me a break.
So it isn't just that moment of the World Cup. Sport had helped your life from an early age.
Oh, yes. And I guess, you know, I listened to a lot of Uber stars sitting in front of the platform, and they will do tomorrow. Sport gave them that opportunity, and there's a lot of corporations and people here that are exceptional in business, in the business of sport. It's a powerful tool. So, you know, it's changed, I guess, and it's affected the people in the room's lives as it has in my story.
Well, as you said, here we are in Doha, which was not an
Amazing.
expected place to bring the world together, and it is because of the power of sport.
Yeah, and the story, the Doha focus is going to be incredible. I've had a glimpse of it for the last 24 hours. There's unbelievable focus. There's resources, and there's this collective urge to make it a special event. And we've also heard, don't compare. But people will compare. You know, that's human race. We will compare. And when people compare the World Cup, the Soccer World Cup, yeah, they'll compare it with other countries. But it'll be unique, it'll be special, and it's going to be a success. It is such a wonderful circus. So, you know, roll on the ears.
Well, 95 was so special for everyone. We thank you so much, Francois, for
Thank you
your
very much.
time. Thank you so much.